"Careful, sir, you might break something," she teased, and his heart skipped a beat. It happened in the most ordinary of places, inside a small antique shop tucked on the corner of a quiet street in Toronto. Daniel, a man in his late 30s, had been wandering inside on a chilly afternoon, his mind heavy with the noise of life. He had just gone through a difficult breakup, the kind that leaves silence ringing in the spaces where laughter once lived. His days had become a routine of work, empty meals, and scrolling endlessly through his phone just to feel less alone. As he bent down to pick up a fragile glass figurine of a bird, his hand trembled slightly. That's when a gentle voice behind him playfully warned, "Careful, sir, you might break something." He turned, startled, and found himself staring at a young woman standing behind the counter. She had a mischievous smile in her eyes, the kind that disarmed him instantly. For a second, the heaviness inside his chest lifted. Her name was Claire. She owned the shop, a place filled with second-hand treasures and stories hidden in dust and wood. She explained how each object had a past, how every chipped teacup or faded painting carried a memory of someone who once cherished it. Daniel listened, more captivated by her voice than the antiques. He hadn't felt this kind of lightness in months. It was as though she had spoken directly to the emptiness he carried, reminding him that even broken things could still hold beauty. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel found himself returning to the shop again and again. Sometimes he bought small items he didn't need, an old book, a music box, a brass key, just to have an excuse to see her. Other times he stayed longer, helping her lift heavy boxes or rearrange shelves. Claire noticed his care, his quiet patience, and she began to look forward to his visits. But Daniel carried his doubts. He feared his heart was too fragile, too bruised from the past. How could someone like her, so full of warmth and light, ever want someone like him, who was still learning to pick up his own broken pieces? He almost convinced himself to step away. Yet every time he thought of leaving, he remembered the sound of her laughter when she teased him, the way her eyes lit up when she shared stories of the objects in her shop. One evening, a storm rolled through the city. Daniel rushed to the shop just before closing, worried she might need help with the leaky windows she once mentioned. Claire was surprised but grateful, and together they placed buckets under the drips, their hands brushing as they worked. The silence between them was heavy but tender. Finally, Claire whispered, "You don't have to keep pretending to come here just for the antiques, Daniel." He froze. Then, with a deep breath, he admitted, "I was afraid you'd see how broken I still am." Claire reached for a porcelain cup on the counter, cracked but glued carefully back together. "Do you see this? Someone loved it enough to mend it. Its cracks tell a story, but it's still whole. That's how I see you." Daniel felt something inside him shift. For the first time in a long while, he believed he wasn't too broken to be loved. They didn't rush into romance that night. Instead, they sat together listening to the rain, letting the storm outside reflect the one they had both survived in their own lives. In the months that followed, their connection grew deeper, not from grand gestures, but from simple kindness. Daniel slowly rebuilt his confidence, not by forgetting his scars, but by learning to see them as part of his story. Claire, who had once carried her own share of heartbreak, found comfort in his steady presence. Their story was not about perfection, but about finding beauty in imperfection. About realizing that love often arrives quietly, in the places you least expect, like an old antique shop on a cold Toronto evening. By the time spring came, Daniel no longer feared breaking something fragile. Instead, he realized that sometimes, the things most worth holding onto are the ones we protect with care, even when they've been broken before. And every time Claire teased him with that same playful smile, his heart still skipped a beat, only this time, he wasn't afraid of it. The message was simple. No one is too broken to be loved, and sometimes the cracks are where the light enters. Would you like me to also craft a ready-to-use YouTube narration script with pacing cues, pauses, emphasis, emotional tones, so it flows perfectly for a 4-minute video?